And we are back. Welcome to Sip&Talk. It is December already. I can't believe it. Less than a month, and the whole year is gone.
I know.
And the international scene has been, well, just completely wild.
Hey, we're rolling. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, Sip&Talkers. No matter what time zone you're in, welcome back. I'm Sunny.
Welcome, welcome. I'm Joe. And I have to say, your eye makeup today is a little strange. A little on the absurd side, maybe.
Yay. Where are your manners? I'm just trying out a new eyeshadow. It's fine. The listeners can't see it. But, speaking of absurd,
There we go.
we have to talk about this latest news coming out of China. Okay, everyone, hold on to your seats. Seriously, don't fall off your chairs. They are pushing for Ryukyu independence.
From Japan.
They want Ryukyu Okinawa to break away from Japan. Can you actually believe that?
I saw this bubbling up a while ago. I just checked again. And you're right. In Japan, it seems like, well, almost no one is paying attention to it.
Right.
But there's Ryukyu Independence Party. It's a small fringe thing, but it does exist.
Okay, so did everyone stay in their chairs? Because this absurdity wind, as I'm calling it, has blown straight into the most sensitive area of international politics.
It really has.
What we're diving into today is this logically impossible, just completely self-contradictory strategy. It feels like we're watching the overbearing game of the double standard CEO.
That's a perfect way to frame it.
Yeah.
Because the core of our discussion today is how China has been observed actively pushing and really using this Ryukyu independence issue.
And we have to be clear.
Yeah, this isn't some rumor. This isn't just a conspiracy theory floating around on the internet.
No.
We're talking about concrete actions backed by Chinese state media, by their academic institutions, and by, their information warfare machine. The entire strategy is built around this core idea they call the Ryukyu status undetermined theory.
And here's where it just gets mind-bending, the logical conflict. This is a regime that, when it comes to Taiwan, screams from the rooftops about indivisible sovereignty and historical ironclad proof. That's their entire brand.
It's their foundation.
But then they look a few hundred miles north to Ryukyu, and suddenly they become the ultimate disruptor. Suddenly it's all about historical tributary relations and arguing about post-war treaty loopholes.
The pivot is just breathtaking. So that's what we're going to get into today. I want to answer two main questions for you. First, what is the actual strategic goal here with this Ryukyu card? Is it really just about independence, or is something else going on?
And second,
what are the long-term risks that this kind of, this self-contradictory, almost absurd governance model poses for us, for the global supply chain, and for just general international security?
A big topic.
It is. Today on Sip&Talk, our topic is China's Ryukyu push, when childish rule triggers global risk.
Let's get into it.
Okay, so let's start by really defining the strategy, because I think it's easy to misunderstand what the immediate threat is here.
Right. This isn't about an invasion tomorrow.
No, not at all. This is not some formal military threat against Okinawa or, an imminent land grab. The Ryukyu card is a real strategy, but we have to see it for what it is. It's a soft knife approach.
A soft knife. I like that.
It's all propaganda. It's legal warfare, political infiltration, all designed to achieve a very, very hard geopolitical goal.
And that goal, you're right, is not actual independence. Not in the short term, anyway. Beijing is not naive. They know that the local desire for separation is, it's tiny. We'll get to the numbers on that later.
Right.
The real objective here is to use this issue as a countermeasure.
A lever.
A powerful one against Japan's increasing involvement in anything related to Taiwan. I mean, Tokyo has been very clear. They've said a Taiwan contingency is a Japan contingency.
And for Beijing, that's an existential threat. So they need a pressure point. They need something inside Japan to create, friction, hesitation.
Exactly. And that pressure point, the big flashing red button, is the huge U.S. military presence in Okinawa.
It's staging ground for literally any potential defense of Taiwan.
Right. So if Beijing can successfully create doubt about Japan's sovereignty over Ryukyu, or just amp up the existing anti-base feelings there to a point where Japanese politicians have to deal with a domestic crisis,
then they've won.
They've achieved their strategic goal without ever firing a shot. It's a classic strategy. You create internal chaos in your adversary.
So let's unpack the mechanics of it. The outline we've seen points to three specific pillars of action they're using to make this happen.
Right. It's legal warfare, information warfare, and political penetration. Okay,
let's start with the first one. Pillar A, legal warfare and the academic campaign. This is where they try to build the intellectual foundation for all of this.
It is, and it's not new. This has been slowly building for, over a decade now. You see it in their official state media, especially outlets like the Global Times and the People's Daily. They've been running articles arguing that Ryukyu was historically a tributary state to China, during the Ming and Qing dynasties.
Yeah. And then, according to them, it was illegally annexed by Japan in 1879. They're trying to frame Japan's claim as some kind of colonial land grab.
And the crucial part is how they try to connect that history to the post-World War II settlement. We saw an article from the Global Times just recently that claimed, and I'm quoting here, sovereignty disputes over Ryukyu have never stopped.
Which is just not true. But they push it.
They push it by citing the Cairo Declaration and the Potsdam Proclamation. These were, declarations of Allied war aims, not formal treaties.
Right, that's a key distinction.
A very key distinction. But they claim these documents should have excluded Ryukyu from Japanese sovereignty, basically arguing the whole issue was just never properly resolved by the treaties that actually ended the war.
It's a very selective reading of history and law, and then they back this up with, a whole academic machine.
This is what makes it so serious. This isn't just a couple of rogue op-eds. This is a sanctioned national policy push. Late last year, Ryukyu Studies was officially selected for their state-level Unique Discipline Support Plan.
And that's managed by the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, CASS, which is a huge deal. That's a massive commitment of resources.
It completely elevates the topic. It's no longer a fringe theory. It's an official state-funded area of focus.
And they're pretty open about the goal, aren't they? CASS has explicitly said the purpose is to, quote, deconstruct Japan's one-sided historical narrative.
They are literally trying to rewrite history books to create a political weapon.
And they're building the physical infrastructure to do it, too. We saw they set up a Ryukyu Research Center at Dalian Maritime University a couple years ago.
And then expanded it last year.
Yeah.
And the choice of a maritime university is not subtle.
No. It suggests this is not just about history. It's about maritime strategy. It's about sea lanes. It's about control of the waters around those islands.
The center's stated purpose is blunt. It's to prove that Ryukyu has belonged to China since ancient times in order to restrain Japan. They're not even hiding it.
But the biggest signal, the one that made everyone sit up and pay attention, came from the very top.
Xi Jinping himself.
Exactly. Back in 2023, he made this very public, very pointed mention of an old Ming dynasty text, the records of envoys to Ryukyu, while he was inspecting the National Archives.
And that's not a casual comment.
Not at all. That is high-level signaling. When the leader of the country brings up an obscure historical text about tributary relations, every diplomat and analyst in the world knows exactly what that means. The Okinawa card is officially on the table.
Which brings us right to Pillar B, information warfare. They've got their talking points from the academics, and now it's time to deploy them.
And this is a massive coordinated campaign. I mean, the reports we've seen indicate there are over 200 state-linked or, manipulated accounts on platforms like X, on Facebook, everywhere.
And their job is simple. Just create a constant drumbeat, a chorus of voices repeating these slogans.
Ryukyu is not part of Japan.
Okinawans hope to return to the Chinese nation.
They're even trying to flip the script on Japan's own language, saying things like, a Ryukyu contingency is a China contingency.
What's really, I think, clever in a very cynical way is how they latch on to real existing local issues. They don't have to invent the discontent from scratch.
No, Okinawa has had a strong and frankly very justified anti-base movement for decades because of the heavy U.S. military footprint.
Exactly. So what Beijing is doing is taking that genuine local frustration, which is directed at Tokyo and Washington, and they're trying to hijack it. They're trying to redirect it.
They're whispering in their ears saying, hey, the solution isn't dialogue. The solution is complete separation from Japan. We're your true saviors.
It's turning local grievances into a geopolitical weapon. We've seen it with certain activists, people like Rob Kajiwara, who get amplified by this machine, who start promoting China as Ryukyu's savior.
Even praising Beijing's policies on ethnic minorities, which is, the level of irony there when you look at what's happening in Xinjiang or Tibet is just staggering.
It's breathtaking. But it shows you how effective a targeted, well-funded propaganda campaign can be.
And that leads into the final piece of the puzzle, Pillar C, political and diplomatic engagement.
Right. This is where they use the power of the state to create wedges between the local government in Okinawa and the central government in Tokyo.
The prime example has to be the visit by Okinawa's governor, Denny Tamaki, to Beijing in 2023.
Oh, absolutely.
The treatment he received was described by everyone as unconventional as preferential. He got a meeting with Premier Li Qiang.
That is not normal. A Japanese prefectural governor does not just get a sit-down with the premier of China.
It was a clear signal. It was designed to elevate Tamaki's status, to show that Beijing supports local autonomy against Tokyo, and to exploit that discontent over the U.S. bases.
And they take this fight to the biggest stage possible, to the United Nations.
Right.
In October of last year, China's deputy UN rep stood up at the General Assembly and accused Japan of prejudice and discrimination against Okinawa's indigenous people.
By doing that, they're giving this international diplomatic gloss to the idea of Okinawan self-determination.
A concept which, need we say, they would crush instantly if anyone tried to apply it within their own borders.
And all of this soft power is backed up by, some very hard power posturing. We see constant reports of Chinese military jets locking their fire control radar onto Japanese planes near Okinawa.
The timing is never a coincidence. This aggressive military pressure always seems to happen right alongside a big propaganda push. It's a full-spectrum campaign.
The goal is crystal clear. Drive a wedge between the U.S., Japan, and the residents of Okinawa, weaken the alliance, and specifically paralyze any potential response to a Taiwan crisis.
So that's the strategy. It's detailed, it's multi-layered, but we have to apply what we call the local reality check.
Absolutely. Because if the goal is actually getting Ryukyu to declare independence.
It is a complete and total paper tiger. Our sources are unanimous on this. A recent NHK poll from this year showed that a huge majority, 84% of residents, support staying with Japan.
84%.
And maybe even more telling, 56%, a clear majority, view China as a major threat. The people on the ground in Okinawa are not buying what Beijing is selling.
They know exactly what's going on. So the strategy isn't about winning hearts and minds for independence. It's about sowing disruption. It's about creating doubt about Japan's legitimacy.
It's an act of geopolitical sabotage.
It is. And this brings us to the real heart of the issue, which is the explosive, unbelievable contradiction in their own logic. That's what we need to really dig into next.
Okay, so this is where we shift gears a bit. We're moving from the what of their tactics to the why of their flawed thinking. This hypocrisy, it isn't just, bad PR.
No, it's much deeper than that.
It fundamentally undermines the entire system of international law that Beijing pretends to champion whenever it suits them.
Let's just nail down this central paradox. We've got maintainer versus disruptor.
Exactly.
When it comes to its own turf, the South China Sea, Tibet, Xinjiang, and especially Taiwan, Beijing is the world's most passionate maintainer. They talk about inviolable sovereignty, the post-war status quo, all of it.
But then they look at Ryukyu and they instantly become the ultimate disruptor. They weaponize every historical claim, every legal ambiguity to try and tear down an existing recognized international border.
It's like they have two completely different rule books, and they just pick whichever one they want depending on the day.
It's impossible to reconcile. Let's look at the two logics. First, the Ryukyu logic, the disruptor rulebook.
Okay.
Here, they argue that pre-modern history, like tributary status, cultural ties, and tiny little loopholes in post-war treaties, all of that is enough to challenge and overturn modern internationally recognized sovereignty.
But then you have their internal logic, the maintainer rulebook.
Right. And for their own territory, current sovereignty is sacred. History, cultural differences, desire for self-determination, completely irrelevant. In fact, even talking about it can be a crime.
It's selective sovereignty on steroids. The rules of international law suddenly depend entirely on whose name is on the deed.
Which leads us right into this legal minefield we're calling logic blind spot number 1, selective amnesia on post-war treaties.
Okay, let's get into the weeds here. What is China's actual legal argument for Ryukyu?
Well, their argument hinges on the San Francisco Peace Treaty of 1951. This is the treaty that officially ended the war for most of the Allies.
Right.
They argue that the treaty didn't explicitly say Ryukyu was being permanently returned to Japan. It used language like Japan would maintain residual sovereignty. And crucially, they point out that China, at the time, didn't sign it.
Neither the PRC nor the ROC government was there.
Correct. So Beijing's argument is, since we didn't sign, the status is legally up in the air. It's unresolved.
But this is where the self-contradiction becomes just jaw-dropping. I call this legal autophagy.
Self-eating.
Yes, the legal system is eating itself because look at their claim to Taiwan. Beijing's entire claim rests heavily on the spirit and the intent of those non-treaty documents we mentioned earlier, the Cairo and Potsdam declarations. They prioritize the intent of the Allies to strip Japan of territories it took by force.
But then, for their Ryukyu argument, they do a complete 180.
A complete
They suddenly reject the spirit of the post-war settlement and instead focus obsessively on the textual loopholes of the San Francisco Treaty, the very treaty that actually created the legal order for the post-war world.
You cannot do that. You cannot rely on the spirit of one set of documents to claim something for yourself and then turn around and rely on the textual loopholes of another, more formal document to deny something to your adversary.
The global implications of that are, frankly, terrifying.
That was a nightmare.
If you allow that kind of logic to stand, the entire post-World War II border system just collapses.
Imagine if Russia suddenly decided to challenge Ukraine's borders based on a typo they found in the 1991 accords that dissolved the Soviet Union.
It's the same logic. Or imagine if other countries that didn't sign the San Francisco Treaty started challenging Japan's sovereignty over other territories.
It gives everyone a blueprint for chaos. By selectively trying to invalidate one foundational treaty, you're inviting every other nation on Earth to challenge every single border that was drawn in the 20th century. It's systemic self-destruction.
And that takes us to logic blind spot number 2. This idea of the infinite extension of historical relations.
This is the tributary state argument.
Right. The argument is, on its face, very simple. Ryukyu was a historical tributary state. It had deep cultural ties to the mainland for centuries, and therefore China has a right to challenge its current status as part of Japan.
It sounds almost romantic, this appeal to ancient history.
It does, but applying these pre-modern political relationships to our modern system of nation-states is so incredibly dangerous. This is where I have to bring out my favorite analogy.
Okay, lay it on us.
I call it the overbearing CEO in Love with Me analogy.
I'm intrigued.
Imagine this powerful ancient patron, the CEO, who is China, pointing at the property of a former employee, Ryukyu. Now, this employee has long since left, become independent, and is now part of a completely different modern company, Japan. And the CEO shows up and demands the property deed, saying, "But we have a history. You used to send me yearly gifts. That tribute proves your heart belongs to me. Therefore, your modern property deed is invalid, and your territory should come back to me, regardless of what international law or your own people say."
That is a perfect analogy. It is pure geopolitical soap opera. It's an assertion of power based on sentiment and a long-dead hierarchy, not on modern law.
And the implication is deadly serious. If we accept the idea that tributary status or cultural affinity can be used to challenge modern sovereignty,
then Beijing has just handed a weapon to all of its neighbors.
Every single one. You're giving a legal tool to the entire Korean peninsula, to Vietnam, to countries in Southeast Asia to say, wait a second, if history is the game we're playing now,
then we have claims on your territory based on that exact same history you're using against Japan.
It's the ultimate boomerang. It would instantly destabilize the entire region. Our modern system of nations is based on the idea of Westphalian sovereignty, not on medieval dynasties.
So the conclusion here is really inescapable. The Ryukyu card is a political tool. It is not a legal claim.
It has zero legitimate legal standing. Its only purpose is to force Japan into internal chaos, distract them, and keep them out of Taiwan. It's geopolitical frustration dressed up as historical scholarship.
So, okay, we've established that this Ryukyu policy is hypocritical, it's self-contradictory, and it's basically legally baseless.
Right.
But like we said at the top, this isn't just one bad policy choice. This pattern of behavior, the contradictions, the policies that seem totally disconnected from reality, the emotional reactions, it's a symptom of a much deeper systemic problem in their governance.
Exactly. And some critics have started calling this decision-making model childish rule.
And we should be clear, that's not just a schoolyard insult. It's a term meant to describe a specific type of system.
It is. It describes a system where policy is often emotional, it's rigid, it's driven by the need to maintain centralized power and, face, rather than being guided by rational data or market logic.
It's like a system that acts like a very powerful, very rigid child. It insists on its own version of reality. It refuses to ever admit it's wrong. And it tends to lash out when it gets frustrated.
And this systemic rigidity is what produces absurd policies like the Ryukyu card. And it comes from 3 core structural flaws.
Okay, let's break those down.
Let's start with structural flaw number 1, the information dictatorship and echo chamber.
This is the most basic problem, right?
It is. The normal ways a government gets feedback, a free press, independent academics, civil society, all of that is either broken or actively suppressed. So power is incredibly centralized, and information only flows from the top down.
Which forces local officials into what experts call performance governance.
Researchers, from places like Stanford, they call this the information dilemma. The central government sacrifices the need for policies to have a good local fit because political loyalty is the only thing that matters.
So local officials, their main job isn't solving local problems. It's achieving the target that was handed down from above so they can report success back up the chain.
Which leads to what's called movement-style governance. If the central government issues a big mandate, like, say, hit this specific environmental target...
So local officials will just do whatever it takes to make the number look good.
Exactly. They'll do these one-size-fits-all campaigns. They'll abruptly shut down factories, even factories that are perfectly compliant, because it's the fastest and safest way to hit that number and protect their own career.
It's policy totally divorced from economic or social reality.
And the most devastating recent example of this was, of course, the zero-COVID lockdowns.
Of course.
That policy was treated like a sacred text for years. It was enforced with extreme rigidity, causing massive human and economic damage, all because no local official dared to question the wisdom of the central leadership.
Because if you challenge the policy, you're challenging the leader, and that's a career-ending move.
Right. And the flip side is just as damaging. When the social pressure finally became unbearable, the policy wasn't carefully phased out. It was just dropped overnight.
With no planning, no preparation.
None. Which led to that chaotic, massive wave of infection and death. That whiplash from extreme rigidity to total chaos is a hallmark of this kind of centralized system that just has no feedback loop.
Which brings us to structural flaw number 2. Loyalty over professionalism.
Or what you could call ideological overload.
Yeah. This is a huge institutional weakness when political loyalty to the party and the leader is the only thing that gets you promoted.
Then actual competence, expert knowledge, market principles, all of that gets pushed to the side.
And the result is economic chaos. We see it as this constant policy ping pong.
It's a huge paradox, right? A system that claims to be all about long-term stability produces constant, volatile, short-term uncertainty for anyone trying to do business there.
Just look at how they treat private companies. One minute, your tech CEOs are national pillars. They're heroes of the economy.
And the next minute, based on some vague new ideological slogan about common prosperity or unregulated capital expansion, the iron fist comes down on entire industries.
Tech, real estate, private education.
The private tutoring industry was basically vaporized overnight. The entire real estate sector, a massive engine of their GDP, was crippled by these arbitrary new financial rules.
And these sudden ideologically driven crackdowns, they terrify global investors.
Of course they do, because it proves that economic decisions are always second to political whims. You can't plan a long-term investment when you have no idea what the next political campaign is going to be.
And this brings us to the final and maybe most dangerous flaw. Structural flaw number 3, the lack of a course correction mechanism.
Or what you could call inertial charge.
Right. This is why the system keeps making these obvious mistakes, like the Ryukyu card policy. Without any independent checks, no free press, no independent courts, no opposition parties, a bad policy can't be reversed.
Because the top leadership can never, ever admit they made a mistake. They can't lose face.
This is the critical danger of the whole structure. There's this cycle where policy correctness equals party correctness, which ultimately equals leader correctness.
So if a policy is clearly failing, the solution isn't to change the policy.
It's to double down, to insist even harder that the policy was right all along.
Which means mistakes get pushed to their absolute extreme no matter what the social or economic cost is. It's like a self-driving car that's programmed to head for a cliff, and its system is designed to accelerate when it gets warning signals, not to hit the brakes.
And the people, and increasingly the rest of the world, are the ones who have to pay the price for the leadership's face.
And that institutional rigidity is exactly why a policy as absurd as the Ryukyu card, once it's been decided on, will be pursued until it either becomes completely unworkable or it forces a crisis.
Which leads us right to the global consequences. When the internal logic is this flawed, how does that volatility spill out and affect the rest of us?
Okay, so now we make the big jump. We go from a critique of their domestic governance to a real global systemic risk. Because if this childish rule logic stayed inside their borders, that's one thing. It's a massive problem for 1.4 billion people.
It doesn't stay there.
It doesn't. When that child is holding the controls to the world's second largest economy, its biggest manufacturer, and a massive military, that domestic flaw becomes everyone's problem.
The operating motto changes from domestic control to international coercion. It becomes, if I'm not happy, I'm going to smash a toy.
And the toys being smashed are our global supply chains, regional stability, and the international norms we've relied on since 1945.
This is how a weird little foreign policy tactic becomes a fundamental global security issue.
Let's start with risk A, smashing the economic interdependence toy, or what we can call unpredictable market risk.
The behavior here is just. It's become a habit. They use these unilateral, sudden, punitive trade bans as a weapon instead of going through normal channels like the WTO.
We've seen it so many times, and it's always this emotional, completely disproportionate reaction. Think about the bans on Australian coal and wine because Australia asked for an inquiry into the origins of COVID.
Or the economic blockade against Lithuanian goods because they opened a Taiwan representative office.
And most recently, the sudden ban on all Japanese seafood after the Fukushima water release, a ban that, ironically, ended up punishing Chinese businesses like travel agencies and restaurants that rely on trade with Japan.
It's the economic tantrum.
It is. And the global impact is enormous. It leads to the complete politicization of the global supply chain. All of a sudden, if you're a multinational company, you can't make decisions based purely on cost and efficiency anymore.
You have to factor in this massive, unpredictable political risk coming out of Beijing.
Let's translate this term de-risking into what it actually means for you, the listener.
Right.
This political uncertainty forces companies into these expensive de-risking strategies. They have to intentionally seek out other, often less efficient places to make their stuff.
They have to duplicate their supply lines. They build a second factory in Vietnam or Mexico just in case the one in China gets shut down by a political tantrum.
They have to hold more inventory, which costs money because they're afraid of sudden customs delays. And that reduction in efficiency, that duplication.
It means higher costs for everyone.
Exactly. That uncertainty premium gets baked into the price of the final product. So when China throws a fit over Ryukyu or Taiwan, you end up paying more for your phone, your shoes, your everything.
And global investors are now genuinely terrified of these black swan events that have nothing to do with the market. It's all political impulse. When your entire investment can be wiped out because your CEO said the wrong thing about an issue 10 years ago, the whole system becomes unstable.
And that leads to the second major threat. Risk B, smashing the regional stability toy.
This is the military escalation risk.
And it comes from the same place. Highly emotional, disproportionate military responses when they feel a political red line has been crossed.
And the Ryukyu card is designed specifically to accelerate this risk. The whole point of pushing the status undetermined theory and stoking anti-base sentiment is to try and paralyze the U.S. bases in Okinawa.
Bases like Kadena Air Base, they are the absolute linchpin of regional stability, especially in a Taiwan scenario. If those bases are tied up in political chaos or physically blocked,
the entire military balance in the region shifts overnight.
And when the decision-making process at the top is fundamentally emotional and about saving face, the room for diplomacy in a crisis just shrinks to almost nothing.
We saw it after the Pelosi visit to Taiwan in 2022. A simple diplomatic visit resulted in these massive, unprecedented military exercises.
It raises the risk of miscalculation through the roof. You have ships and planes operating so close to each other that a simple mistake, a technical glitch, could escalate into a full-blown conflict because there's no political off-ramp for either side to back down without looking weak.
And the world has to pay the insurance premium for that unpredictability. And that premium could be measured in human lives.
This is the really profound difference. With a mature, great power, you can usually analyze their documents, their speeches, and predict a rational range of actions.
You can game it out.
You can, but when the governing logic is this childish rule model, you have to start trying to factor in the personal emotion and ideological impulses of the top leadership into your global risk models.
It's an almost impossible task. The whole point is that their rationale is opaque, and it can't be corrected by facts on the ground.
The fundamental danger is that this structure replaces the stability and predictability you expect from a great power with a volatile, authoritarian unpredictability.
And this systemic volatility, which is perfectly demonstrated by this absurd Ryukyu card policy, it forces the rest of the world to stop treating China as just a competitor.
And start treating it as a systemic rival.
Which just accelerates the fragmentation of the global order and makes long-term stability that much harder to achieve for everyone.
Wow, that was a really dense and, to be honest, pretty alarming analysis.
It was. Let's try to quickly summarize the key takeaways for everyone listening.
Okay, so first, the core absurdity of the Ryukyu card is the extreme double standard. They demand sacred, indivisible sovereignty at home while actively promoting separatism abroad.
And they use these legal arguments that, if anyone else used them, would immediately shatter their own borders and the entire post-war legal system.
Second, this contradictory policy isn't just a one-off mistake. It's a direct symptom of those deep structural governance flaws, what we've been calling childish rule.
Right. The extreme centralization of power kills any kind of feedback loop and forces officials to choose loyalty over professionalism, which creates these rigid, volatile, and frankly dangerous policies.
And finally, those internal flaws don't stay internal. They get transmitted globally and they become systemic risks for all of us. The world is forced into this expensive de-risking.
And we all have to pay an economic premium for stability because we're dealing with a major global power whose first instinct is to smash the toys when it doesn't get its way.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you to chew on.
Here it is. Since children in power don't usually stop smashing toys until they face real, unavoidable consequences, what kind of mechanism could possibly lead to a more rational and predictable governance model?
Is it targeted economic isolation? Is it a unified international coalition speaking with one voice? Or is it some kind of internal political shift that we can't even imagine right now?
What could possibly install a brake pedal on that self-driving car that's heading for the cliff?
That is the biggest question, I think, facing global leaders today. So thank you to all the Sip&Talkers for tuning in and sticking with us for this very deep dive.
Thank you all so much. And before we sign off, please, if you haven't already, subscribe to Sip&Talk wherever you get your shows. Give us a 5-star rating, share this conversation. It really helps.
And don't forget to support our friend Mickey's YouTube channel, Mickytolife.
He's got fun memes, liquor tasting, amazing travel vlogs. Go give that man a like.
Tell him we sent you.
Until next time.
Stay curious, stay informed, and think critically.